welcome in to another edition of Dish and Ish. My main man, Damon Benning here.
What up?
I'm Ravi Lulla.
How we doing?
I'm doing good, man.
Good.
How are you?
I am spread thin.
You're busy.
I am.
You're a busy man.
I am spread extremely thin.
Busier than normal, even.
Yeah, it's just weird, right? We have a ton of things. We got team camp. We've got a little bit next week. We've got a youth camp. I've got to get my blockhead son down to Lincoln next week. I've got it's just so it's a lot going on. Going back to school.
Yeah. Coming up faster than you think.
Yeah.
When do you guys start?
We start, I think camp opens, staff is back.
Already?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
admin, I think they started back this week. We've got a staff meeting at the school on the 2nd.
Okay.
I think officially camp opens the 4th maybe or the 5th. You'd think I would know.
And then when are kids back in school?
I don't know.
No idea.
I mean, shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Shortly thereafter.
It feels like it's getting earlier. We used to start like mid-August.
I know, right?
First week of August now.
Oh, yeah. Well,
crazy.
we play the week of the 25th.
Oh, so that's pretty early.
Right? So it'd be 3 weeks.
Because you get 3 weeks.
It'd be 3 weeks working backwards. So
Man.
High school football is alive and well.
I'm excited. I'm excited for high school football. I'm excited for college football.
Yeah, we're right there.
Because Nebraska is just that later that week, right? They're the 31st, right?
Yeah.
So we're barely a month out.
Yeah, the schedule breaks so nice having to do the opportunity, I guess I should say, having to do the broadcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the schedule breaks well. I mean, Colorado's going to be tricky for me.
Sure. Yeah.
And I probably will miss Illinois.
That's the Friday night game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's tough.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pot committed to the high school kids.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? It's like once they did once they went with that Friday night change. I mean, I was on the phone immediately.
Sure.
The minute it leaked, trying to talk to both athletic directors, both Kearney and Westside.
Yeah.
If it was our home game, we would maybe have had the opportunity to
bump it up,
take a look at moving it to a Thursday. But
yeah.
Kearney's home game on a Friday, we didn't have near the flexibility. So
Sure.
I understand. I mean, it's a good football team too. If I'm Coach Cool in that bunch,
oh yeah,
shoot, man,
absolutely.
I'd be as unaccommodating as possible.
They don't want to help you out too much.
Nah, he's such a good coach too. I mean, there's no sense.
Yeah. So I mean, since we're on college football,
so is like Jacob not understand that we're working or like
he definitely does not.
So somebody needs to have a talk with old Jacob Shane to let him know that he is alive and kicking.
Yeah, the mics are hot. The mics are hot.
Hey, listen, is this thing on? So how you been, man? Have you missed me a little bit?
I have. I always
been a lot of hot button topics, man. You kind of been missing me.
I always miss my conversations with you. And I got some feedback. People were a little cranky with us last week.
Why?
Because we started hinting at the Pat Fitzgerald stuff, and we didn't actually.
We never got to it.
We didn't dive into it. So I think maybe we should start there.
What, Shane? Are you going to produce, or what are you doing? Like, I mean, what is this thing on? Like, what is this bizarro world?
As far as I know, we are live here.
I can't even remember why we didn't get to the Pat Fitzgerald thing.
Because Shane started playing us off. He started playing the music. He's like,
"Oh, that's right." Because we were already like an hour and some.
We were like 40 minutes in.
It goes fast.
It does go fast. But we've had some more developments with the Northwestern situation. Nothing shocking. We assume there's going to be lawsuits and things like that. Braun got named the interim head coach, but that's not really the stuff.
So how about specifically though? You have one power broker that was hired by Pat Fitzgerald.
Yes, yeah.
But with what's now coming out, you've had a couple of other prominent lawyers in Chicago saying, "Hey, listen, we haven't filed any lawsuits yet, but they're coming.
Yes, they've been contacted by players. They're getting their ducks in a row before they start filing things. We already have one that's been filed. So this is going to take a while to play out, right? This is not going to be a quick process. Pat Fitzgerald, I imagine, is going to file wrongful termination against the college and everything like that. And so that's going to take a while. But kind of the thing I was interested in through this whole process, right, is how we viewed Northwestern versus what was actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it goes kind of back to the leadership thing that I think is challenging because it's so hard to quantify, right? Leadership is kind of that great intangible.
You know it when you see it, but you're not quite sure how to always explain it.
Right?
Yeah, 1,000.
And it can look so different. That's the other tricky part, is there's many effective styles of leadership. And so
a leader.
The thing with Northwestern was we looked at them and said, oh, that is a program that is well led. That is a program that has their culture right.
Yeah.
That is a program that wins based off of those things, despite not having the talent level of other people. I mean, this is a team that won their division 2 years ago in 2020.
Yep.
Right. And I get 2020 was weird for everybody, right? Like Michigan goes 2-4, and then they go to 2 straight college football playoffs. Northwestern wins their division, and then they win 1 game in each of the next 2 conference seasons. But I'm trying to figure out, and I'm hoping this is where you can shine some light for me.
I don't know.
I'm crossing my fingers here. How did we have that image of Northwestern with this stuff going on?
It's
because the disconnect is enormous.
Yeah, it's kind of disturbing. And it's not only that, Ravi, we were so far off.
Yeah.
It's almost unexplainable.
It's unsettling because now to me, I'm like, okay, what else are we getting wrong?
Oh, I know. So you know what it's going to teach us to do? Be paranoid.
Yeah.
You will,
which I don't like.
Hey, well, I mean, this is like the ultimate Charlie Brown.
Yeah. You just pull the football right away from us, and we're all sitting on our keisters being like, well, how come we didn't kick it?
And here's the thing. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
So we'll be even more wrong. We used to talk about, I remember, Ravi, we were at Big Ten Media Days. And we were talking to, was it Jackson? Yeah, the really good running back.
Mm-hmm.
So this was some years ago, probably 5-6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was still in Chicago back then. And I was asking him about kind of this narrative that, hey, man, they don't get to recruit to the level of everybody else, and they don't have as good of players and the academic standards and admissions. And he's like, hey, listen, we're to the point now. We don't. This, that, and the third. And I'm just thinking to myself, gosh, he kind of bristled up at the thought. We had one of their safeties. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. And he said the same thing. He's like, look, the national folks talk about that.
Yeah.
That's not what we talk about in the program. We know we've got good players doing big things, and that's how we look at it.
Yeah.
And so I think some of I say all that to say some of that stuff comes from us, right?
Sure.
Like nobody's ever
the culture thing. And
right.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever who was there a Northwestern spokesperson that said, this is the Wildcat way?
Sure.
Not really.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not like PJ Fleck who goes out there and says culture over talent.
Yeah.
Right.
Or will
said
tell you the things that they're doing
right?
inside the program to get. See, Coach Rule's going to have to own it a little bit, right? Because
which is one of the things I like about him.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
He's not afraid to say it and take responsibility.
And he has a couple of non-negotiables.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So
you think
violence against women and kids, non-negotiable.
No.
There's a way that we're going to do business. This is how we're going to go to school. So you have an idea of this family thing, but we've never really heard that from Northwestern. We got an idea based on how his teams played and how he addressed the podium.
So that's really interesting because
At least I think so.
and I think you're onto something there. Is it because we looked at the talent in terms of recruiting rankings and whatever and what they were bringing in? And listen, they've sent a handful of guys to the NFL here and there, but
they've actually sent more than
you think.
Yeah,
right. But it's not Ohio State. It's
right.
like it's not a football factory.
Correct.
They send a good amount of guys to the NFL for who they are, basically. I mean, more than Nebraska has recently, frankly. But
this team they sent 4 guys to the NFL last year.
I know, off of 1-11.
I know it.
Right? How does that even happen?
I know it.
But do you think it's because we look at the recruiting rankings and say, oh, they can't possibly be winning on talent. It has to be the other stuff. It has to be culture. It has to be the way they're coached. It has to be all these other things. And so we just land on because we don't understand how it's happening.
So do you remember when Nebraska scored 56 on Northwestern 2 years ago at home? Do you remember Pat Fitzgerald's press conference?
Not specifically, no.
Super short, real terse. He was angry. And we were like, we were so unused to that delivery that we kind of made excuses for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe it had just happened so infrequently to him
that we didn't know that's how he reacted.
Correct.
That's interesting.
You need to go back. So, like,
that's really interesting.
Listen, he lost his mind. He's super short.
Because they don't get beat up like that.
Kind of talked about running up the school. Like it was very and I almost got ready to say it again. It seemed very unfits like.
It seemed out of character.
Right.
But
maybe it wasn't.
Your argument is maybe we didn't know.
Right.
That's really interesting to think about of what we thought we knew versus what there was evidence to actually support.
Yeah, we had a head coach for a while where we talked ourselves out of what we pretty much knew going in. It was almost just the opposite. You had folks that said, hey, there are some red flags here. This, and this. And it was, no, you guys are jealous. It's the golden. It's all these excuses were made.
Sure.
Never had a Power 5 job. And it all turned out to be
exactly the red flags.
True.
Yeah.
Right. My dad used to always say something. And since I'm kind of a redemption guy, I never knew how much I kind of subscribed to it. But it doesn't have to be a negative either. He said, if people go out of their way to show you who they are,
believe them.
Believe them.
Yep. I knew that's what you were going to say. But as soon as you started talking, and I never met your dad. I had never heard you say that before, but that's 100% right. Right? Like when people show you who they are, trust them. Believe what they are telling you.
So how'd we miss on Fitz? He just didn't show us enough? Because he has guys, I mean, he's being defended currently as we speak. Now we've had some, now there are more people.
So that's the tricky part of these situations, right? Because when there's bullying, harassment, things like that, not everyone receives that the same way. So two people can be in the same locker room, seeing the same thing, and have very different versions of what they experienced, right? If you're someone who thinks that's just quote unquote team bonding, that's like if you came from a high school, that's how they did things, and it seemed normal to you from the time you were 14 years old, then you get to Northwestern and they're still doing it, you probably don't think that much of it. But if you came from a high school where that wasn't what was going on, there was no hazing, there was no bullying, there was no harassment, and all of a sudden you get to college, this prestigious university, this coach that's supposed to be a stand-up guy, all these other highly achieving academic people that are also really good at football, and this stuff starts going on, that's probably a pretty big culture shock for you. And you probably aren't as likely to just accept what's happening. Not that anybody should, right?
So when this first happened, I remember saying on the morning show, I was like, maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe it's a position group thing. I don't really know.
Like it was more insulated, maybe.
I can't really relate to like the sexual innuendos. And
okay.
I remember saying this on the show. I'm like, the whole car wash thing. I'm like, who does that? Like, it just seemed kind of different, and I was willing
Mm-hmm.
to just say maybe I'm naive,
Sure.
maybe just the skill guys, and I didn't
Yeah.
know, right?
Right.
But I'm thinking real time out
Mhm.
loud. And the anonymous player yesterday, because some guys are speaking out, and he said, this isn't good either. But it kind of gets to your thin slated thing. He basically was like, yeah, that was just weird fat guys doing weird fat guy shit.
Yeah.
So it gave me pause. Number one, I was like, okay, I don't feel validated, but I did wonder, like, just there was just some weird, and I'm not sexual assault,
Mhm.
or hazing shouldn't look a certain way or come a certain way. I just wasn't
No.
familiar with it.
Yeah.
So when he said it, I was like, is this just unique to certain position groups
Yeah.
and nobody else knew? Or did everybody know and they're like, oh, that's just those guys? Because
Yeah.
that is part of how you can get here so easily.
Yeah. So let me ask you
If
this.
it's good for some and it doesn't affect others,
You just leave it alone.
a lot of times people leave it alone because that's how we do things, right? It
If it
doesn't
doesn't
affect
affect us,
it doesn't affect them.
and they seem to be okay with it. So let me ask you this.
I just thought that was interesting.
You were in
By the
these.
way,
Yes.
real quick,
Yeah.
one thing that Coach did for at least for the first half of his career, his 17-year career, he made himself accessible. So I mean, you might have missed partly on Coach because of that, because he did make himself so accessible. I mean, we had him on the air in the other lifetime a lot of different times.
Mm.
So
Interesting. That's an interesting point.
There's a couple of deals on social media on JPA football and at JPA football or JS. I'm Ravi. I need you to read that for me.
All right, I got you. It is JASRI football.
Yeah, just read the little preliminary stuff.
Okay. This Northwestern story is wild.
This dude is reading like me in front of a teleprompter.
Allegedly, the hazing at the university goes back to the 90s via The Athletic. They would do weird things naked, like naked pull-ups and rope swings, dry humping, horrible stuff. This is a quote now, it was weirdo fat guys on the team doing weirdo fat guy-ish.
It's a podcast. You can cuss if you want.
It was always effed up. Everything about it was effed up. How did this go unknown for so long? So this
Right.
JASRI football,
And it's all over social media now.
is maybe insinuating that Fitzgerald picked this up as a player.
90s.
I mean, what, 95 Rose Bowl team?
Yeah.
That was Fitzgerald, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe it's not just a Fitzgerald thing, but then that goes to, okay,
I'm just trying to give you the backstory.
We're trying to figure out
your
the
original
context.
question.
Yeah.
Your original question was, how did we miss so badly?
Yeah.
Right? How were we so off? And kind of as we continue to dig and pull back, what may have been normal to some isn't normal to others. And then to who it wasn't normalized for,
Sure,
they speak out about it. Now here we go. Because isn't that how it usually ends up?
Yes, I think so. But it's
until it affects us.
So it's hard though with it. Let's say that's accurate. Let's say it goes back to the 90s. That makes it really hard to feel like it's just a few weird guys doing a few weird guy stuff. You know what I mean? Like that.
Unless it's specific to position groups.
But it's still systemic at that point.
Like there were things that the D line would do for traditions that
you didn't know anything about.
No, I did. I just
I
was mortified. I was like,
okay,
that's how they celebrate birthdays. That's not how we're going to celebrate.
That's not how the running back room celebrates.
Yeah,
birthdays.
we're not getting down like that.
So let me ask you this, right? There's, even if it's a position group thing, let's say it's just the offensive lineman. They're saying weird fat guys doing weird fat guy things, whatever. Let's say it's just linemen, because offensive linemen are wired a little bit different.
Yeah. And they're exceptionally close with their camaraderie.
Because you
too.
have to be, right?
Yeah.
There's the synergy you have to have with your teammates to be effective has to be off the charts, right?
Correct.
And that usually happens on and off the field. So if there was, you mentioned D-line, right? If there was a weird tradition somewhere else in the locker room, even if you weren't participating, you knew about it, right?
Yeah.
Was there much that went on in that locker room related to you or not that you didn't know about? I mean, like personal lives and stuff, I'm sure, but something that was to do with the football team.
Probably not. Like somebody would have said something, but I will say this. So sometimes in a locker room, and this was even like this in Carolina, you have wings.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
You have sections.
Yeah.
And some guys are in the locker rooms longer than others.
Yeah. Some guys kind of hang out there a little bit.
Right?
Yeah.
Some guys don't enjoy being in the locker room. They get
They
in,
get dressed,
they get out.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't see everything
Sure.
all the time. And a lot of times, the bigger the position group is, the more time they spend together in the locker room.
Sure.
Typically speaking.
So offensive line, defensive lines spend a lot of time together.
Yeah. You don't see like 3 quarterbacks just sitting in the locker room chilling, or 5 running backs, or 6 wide receivers,
15 offensive linemen.
You just
whatever.
You know what I mean? Like the family guys do family stuff.
Sure.
And I use that in air quotes, like just bonding.
Your little position
together.
family.
Bonding together. And that's a big bonding group.
Yes. Yeah.
Those are bonding. Again, not rationalizing any.
But you could understand. There's a difference between rationalizing and understanding.
Correct.
Right? So you could understand how a position group, say offensive lineman, defensive lineman, whoever, had traditions that were not team-wide.
Correct.
That were maybe a little more bizarre.
What 1,000%.
And again,
true.
This is not belittling the.
No, I can understand.
Hazing,
I can understand.
But you could see how they would have weird things that they did,
or things that I thought were weird.
Yes,
or you may think were weird.
Normal.
We're like, yeah, this is just how we do it.
This is just what we do, right? So, I think we can understand like a context of how it happens. What I still struggle to understand, and this is where I find the story the least plausible, is how a head coach wouldn't know about it.
Well, so here's the thing.
Okay.
Well, there's a couple.
Okay.
If it's a 90s thing, I'm assuming this
he
player
definitely knew about it because he
that made the
90s.
statement.
Yeah.
Said this started in the 90s.
Yeah.
Now maybe somebody told him, hey, this has been a tradition since before the 90s.
This has been going all the way back.
I didn't get that from reading the article because there's full blown stories.
Yeah,
now.
Absolutely.
Fitzgerald was a part of the 90s, right? So there are things that you do that are customary for like your sphere of influence that I may find strange.
Yeah. Probably not illegal, at least in my life. I try not, right? But it's like, oh, that's kind of an odd thing that you do.
So if Fitz is like, if he's been conditioned or groomed
to think that that's normal,
hey, they'll get over it. I mean, it's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
It's just part of the deal. It's just part of the deal. I mean, how many times do you
but
say
him
that?
not knowing doesn't seem plausible. Am I wrong there?
No, you're not wrong.
Right. Like, I understand that's the defense he probably has to take in order to ever get a chance to coach again.
Well, I just thought it was interesting how some of the players early on, now they seem to be a little fewer and far between, but I haven't like dug into it. Remember the retort immediately from the players was, this has been blown out of proportion. It's been exaggerated. It's comical. Coach Fitzgerald had no idea what was going on. Like, I mean, they were quick to say he didn't know. Now,
if that's your guy,
I don't know if they're going to be willing to die on that hill if the right people come forth and say, hey, listen, man, he 100% knew.
So there's a difference between knowing and like facilitating also.
Correct.
Right? Because I have a hard time believing, because listen, I coached.
Are we getting into law?
Well, I wasn't yet, but we can if you want.
I'm just saying, a lot of times ignorance is not a defense.
Correct. Yeah. Well, and that's whether we're talking about legally or in terms of his contract and job status. His job is to know what's going on, right? And that goes again to kind of the leadership. If he, in the very implausible scenario that he didn't know what was going on, that means it's a terrible leader. You can't have this level of thing happening in your program and have no idea.
Okay, so I remember I was probably a junior going into my junior year.
Mhm.
And it was in fall camp, and the move was getting ready to be made for a couple of young guys to change locker rooms.
Mhm.
And I don't remember specifically, but Coach Osborne said something to the effect of, hey, I understand that X, Y, and Z has been going on in the locker room
Mhm.
when our young players make these transitions.
Mhm.
Let's not do that. Am I clear? Right? Half full water bottles, wet towels.
Sure.
I mean, you kind of went through it, right? We, full disclosure, I think we were a little upset because we wonder who told.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know I'm not misremembering that part.
Yeah.
So at that point, Coach Osborne had no idea. He had no idea. Somebody told him
Sure.
that was going on, because he said to the, basically his point was, it's been brought to my attention. And we immediately thought, man, did somebody that didn't want to go through this leaked? Like, were they scared?
Do you,
We
Would
no
they have-
longer were able to do some of the birthday things that we used to do.
Yeah.
Because we used to never want to tell anybody when our birthday was.
Yeah.
And not all those things he was privy to. Like, sometimes people started to tell, so we couldn't do them as much.
You
And I
can't.
think 85, 90% of my teammates will corroborate that. I'm telling you, he didn't know. Now, the difference is, if you're taking what was said on social media at face value in these articles and that this started in the 90s,
Mhm.
you'd have to assume that
Right. Because
Fitz was a part of that.
he went through it.
You can't be everywhere. I mean, as one person,
No,
the
I
coach
understand.
can't. And is it? God, I just, I mean,
We didn't cut Ferentz any slack.
And I still don't, right? But here's my question. So maybe Coach Osborne didn't know.
I just
Did the
remember that
position-
specific example.
Did the position coaches know? Did anybody know? That's kind of my question.
See, that I don't know.
Because
I can't speak to that
Sure.
with near as much confidence.
Sure.
I don't know what the late, great Coach Tenenper or Coach Young knew.
so what I have a hard time believing.
and by the way, the one thing is, it probably didn't happen while they were there. Like the coach probably wasn't there.
Right. Because they didn't go in the locker room. So I don't know if the players told or not.
So that's where
Those guys were never in the coaches were never in the locker room.
So that's where I have a
I'm
little
telling
bit
you.
of a. I think there's a difference between maybe Fitz not knowing and no one knowing, and not reporting it up to Fitz, right?
Yeah.
Like that seems implausible. It's like, I don't know. When I was coaching, and I get basketball teams are way smaller, right? So it's easier to know what's going on. But our guys thought we didn't know about stuff all the time, and a lot of the stuff we just chose to let it go.
But let me ask you something. Because I think this is the perception. We may have to talk to more coaches
Mhm.
of the variety of sports. In football,
Mhm.
there is a certain sanctity or safe haven that is that's the player's space.
So you stay out of it.
It's widely kind of thought that coaches don't just hang out in the locker room because it's for the players.
Sure. And I think that was the same with us. We really didn't, unless we were pregame, postgame, like giving instructions, giving
Right.
talks, whatever. We didn't spend a lot of time in the locker room.
Because whether it's, I don't know any of my coaches, and this is just at the high school
That
level,
just hung out.
that go in the locker room. Unless, like, let's say it's after and we'll like do walkthroughs
Yeah.
for cleanup and stuff. And that's at all 4 schools I've been at. They just didn't, even when they would come out of the coach's office, which is usually connected to the locker room, they didn't like go and walk
No,
through
you
it.
just walk right through, you get out.
For our pregame talk,
Mhm.
our locker coach, they would walk around to the entrance of the locker room, even though there was a connecting door,
Mhm.
versus going through the locker room to the end where we came out.
Interesting.
So again, I'm processing through this
Yeah,
real time,
absolutely.
right? So I'm not
And
confirming it.
again, not excusing, not rationalizing.
No, for sure. I'm just saying,
trying
like,
to understand the different possibilities of what was plausible versus what isn't.
yeah, I just think we're missing. I think we're missing the elephant, and we're missing the elephant in the room.
What's that?
How was this not brought up in the 6-month report?
So that is also a very interesting question. And
Like, what happened? Did you not read it?
so I think I know what happened. But I'm kind of going off on my own here in terms of conspiracy
Yeah,
theory.
you're not afraid. By the way, you've been checking up on those Tupac investigations in Vegas. You guys, listen, you guys laugh all you want. When you find my man chilling in New Zealand, about 30 miles from the Auckland Islands on his own private resort,
New
you'll be
Zealand.
like, man, that damn DB.
Was he like,
down under.
I mean, he had to get out of Italy. It was too crowded on the waterways.
Was he an
Plus,
extra?
he knew some folks were sniffing around.
They were closing in?
Well, I mean, the truth's about to come out, so you
Here
know,
we go.
Conspiracy or not.
Listen,
but anyway,
we'll have a whole pod on it.
and then I'm telling you, I'll put you deep on Kobe and Big Pharma. And
Here's my thought, okay, on the 6-month investigation. I don't think they wanted to find anything.
Huh.
That's my thought, is that a player anonymously, right, came forward, said these things. The university is obligated to look into it, right? Because otherwise that player goes public and we're seeing what we see now.
fair.
So let's say you get a tip and you're like, yes, we will investigate this. We have to. These are serious allegations. You're paying the people that are doing the investigation at the end of the day. You are employing them, right?
I'm with you.
So be pretty easy to say, hey, maybe we don't dig too deep. Maybe we don't contact any other.
Hey, let's just investigate for show.
Yes, it was a for show. I think
I'm not saying that's not plausible.
it's entirely possible that it was a for show investigation to placate the person that came forward and that they thought they could brush it under the rug.
Don't you think said person would say, hey, talk to such and such and such and such? They were there, just like the student newspaper did.
Right. But here's why the line of the sequence of events makes sense, right?
You've got a line of demarcation for me?
Well, so, okay, let's say he goes forward. They do the 6-month investigation. He probably doesn't know what's in the report. I mean, he probably still doesn't know what's in the report, right? But he probably is assuming they're talking to all these people. He's probably assuming they're doing this on the up and up. When it becomes clear that they didn't, with the 2-week suspension that was apparently agreed upon and negotiated between Fitzgerald and administration,
okay,
that player says, hey, that doesn't seem right if they know what I know. And then he goes to the student.
Now, wait a minute. So you're operating, this is separate from you going off on your own of what you think. Is this in addition to, you think they just kind of fluffed the investigation?
No, this is part of it.
Okay.
I think if you're a Fitz believer, like it seems like the Northwestern administration was, right?
Okay.
They're all in on Fitz. Do you want to find something that will give you cause to fire him?
Well, do you believe the neutral third party?
No, I don't, because they're paying the third party to do the investigation.
Okay.
That whoever is paying you automatically are no longer neutral.
Okay.
Am I crazy?
No, I'm listening.
Like wherever your checks are coming from, you stop being neutral.
Okay.
That's part of the deal.
So you don't think they're like, hey, I need to find some things?
I think they found exactly as much as Northwestern wanted them to find. Okay. I think they didn't ask too many questions. I think they took their sweet time so it would seem like a legit investigation. And then when it came out, 2-week suspension, first of all, the student newspaper is like, we had a 6-month investigation and all we got is a 2-week suspension.
This is what we got. Yeah.
I think the anonymous player probably was like, hey, if they knew what I knew, it wouldn't be a 2-week suspension.
So you think he was mad?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, but
because if you're motivated enough to speak up in the first place, you want to see real consequences for the perceived wrongs.
All right, but listen to me now.
Okay.
So you think Schill was cool? Was he just that hands off that he knew this is going to be on the athletic department's dime?
Mhm.
Okay, we got this investigation going. So in 24 hours, I'm going to have to totally retract everything that I said in my initial announcement of said 2-week suspension. And he was like, it's a good game to play. Let's play the game where I'm going to have to embarrass myself.
I don't think he thought he was going to. I think he thought he could get away with it.
Listen to what you're okay. Let's say you're right.
I think he thought he could get away with it. I think they
That's
thought
fine
they could
because,
get away
and I'm
with
not saying you're crazy. The general consensus is I think they thought that they could sweep it under the rug until the student newspaper did their
until
deal.
the student newspaper
What
said,
I'm
"No,
telling
sir."
you is
Yeah.
a president in a position of leadership
Mhm.
thought was that naive where he's like, you know what? Nobody else is going to say anything. I'm going to have this. Just say this out loud.
Mhm.
6-month investigation? Check. It passes the eyeball test. It says we were taking a long time.
Yeah.
From said investigation, I'm going to announce a punishment.
Mhm.
My punishment is 2 weeks without pay in the summer. You know what, guys? I've been practicing reading this statement in the mirror. This is going to pass the smell test because I'm the president of the university going into my second year.
Mhm.
And everybody's going to be like, oh, hey, cool, good job. You think he was so naive or so
Stupid
that was the conscious effort? It was a plan all along.
Here's the other thing that you have to think about is a possibility.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying.
So he's going to have to eat that because as the prez at Northwestern, it's still going to be about athletics and we're going to save Fitz's ass. That's what you're telling me?
So here's the thing that I'm thinking about. You mentioned second year at the school, right? Second year as the president.
I think it was the second year.
He's a newer guy.
Yeah.
The AD has only been there a couple of years. He's a newer guy.
Greg's not good at his job.
Yeah, I don't know how that guy still has a job. We can maybe get into that later.
It may take longer. May take longer to figure out how to fire him.
But maybe he's just overwhelmed with the idea of having to fire the face of the university, and he's trying to find any way to not have to do that.
Okay, so if nothing was in the report, this is part of your theory. I'm just playing along with your theory.
If it was a
very
sham
topical report, why not release the report and redact the names?
I don't know. Because, well, I mean, it's entirely possible that
if you're not going to find much anyway.
Well, so it's entirely possible that releasing the report in his mind would lead other people to start digging.
Okay, so worse than a lenient suspension of 2 weeks in July without pay.
What's worse than?
So you're like, oh, he's smart enough to not release the report and redact the names because it would invite further investigation, but not smart enough to know if there's something really here. And he comes across as a guy that's letting Fitz get away with murder, which apparently the first victim thought he was, that he's going to have to eat that.
So here's my theory, at least, right?
Does that make sense to you?
No, I get what you're saying. Is that if he reads the report, he commissions the report, he asks them, hey, maybe we don't dig too deep and don't find too much. Then he doesn't for sure know that there's more. He can think it in the back of his head, but it's a plausible deniability thing, right?
Okay.
If it's a sham report.
Okay, now I'm vibing there.
If it's a sham report.
Plausible deniability.
And there's not much in the report, then he can plausibly deny. He's like, I didn't think there was any more. This is what the report
How would
told
you
me.
like to be the people conducting said investigation and come back after 6 months with not a pot to piss in?
I'd feel like I was well paid. That's what those people do, man. Because they hire law firms, right? Law firms are billable hours. Of course, they're going to take 6 months.
I understand.
Right?
I understand.
It doesn't matter if they find anything or not to the law firm. They're still getting hired by the next guy. It's like those search firms that give you.
They're not taking 6 months to find a coach, though, unless you're Nebraska.
They aren't taking 6 months to find a coach, but they're taking those paychecks and giving you the most obvious name that you could have searched on the internet.
You got to remember, though, when it comes to this, when you compare the newspaper to the university itself, the newspaper.
You're talking about the school newspaper.
Yes, the school newspaper has the advantage because they're colleagues, they're the same age, they know people. They probably hang out with people. I mean, they probably have heard all of this before and they knew who to ask. I mean, you get that feeling from it. Whereas in maybe the university just didn't know how to what channel to go down, what avenue to go down, how to do this. And I'm not defending them. I'm just saying.
No, I know. We're just trying to fact find.
Well, and that's a less sinister explanation than mine. Mine is assuming nefarious intention.
Well,
right?
Here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
I feel like 90% of the people that are being objective or anti-Northwestern will feel the same way.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm being objective.
Because how is this not in some way nefarious?
Right. Like, it's really hard to look at what we know.
I'm just what I'm asking, and I said this from the jump, from day one. I was talking about this. I said you have to realize something here.
Mm-hmm.
We're missing an incredible chunk of information because in 20 hours, this is what I said first, and some people that weren't. Some people actually even thought I was victim blaming. I was like, you got to listen to what I'm saying here. In 20 hours,
the pieces we had didn't match up.
Not one bit. Not one.
So I agree with you.
Not one, Ravi. And it was so misleading that we convinced ourselves that they were really going to try to get away with this. If you're going to try to get away with it,
do better.
Do better. A 2-week July suspension.
It should have been indefinite.
Not a game, not indefinite.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. You can tell me till you're blue in the face. Hey, man, DB, they were going to try to get away with it. No bleep.
Yeah.
But what I'm telling you
They're
is
not very good at it.
If you're going to go that far,
be better.
Be as part of your conspiracy theory, you're not going to draw attention to yourself with a 2-week July non-paid suspension?
Right. You're right.
So you go all the way that far.
Yeah. It's the hole in my theory. That's fair.
You go all the way that far to blow the punishment?
You're right. I mean, you're not wrong.
You screw up the 6 months. It's a topical investigation. You don't want to find anything. Plausible deniability, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end, I would have got away if it wasn't for you meddling kids. You have a Scooby-Doo moment because you can't punish correctly?
Yes. I mean, that's the theory.
That's pretty dumb.
It is pretty dumb.
That's pretty dumb.
But
because you knew you were going to piss off
do you put it past
the complaint?
Do you put it past them to be pretty dumb?
I don't know, man. I don't know why. I should know better.
Because I don't put it past them to be dumb.
I just think when it's like, I don't even know.
Because how many times do we see these organizations, with professional, college, whatever, botch things like this? Not like this necessarily.
They typically don't botch the punishment, though.
No, but they botch it.
Kansas got away scot-free, and they sat Self for 5 games.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
But people botch things, whether it's this level of severity in terms of seriousness and the allegations. But people botch things like this all the time. That they should be better at their jobs.
I hear you.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but to go back to Shane's point, right? His is the non-nefarious explanation. That, because I can see a world, this player comes forward anonymously, right? So in order for him to tell the administration or the search firm or whoever who they have to ask, he risks his anonymity. If he's giving names of other people, and if he wants to be anonymous, maybe he doesn't want to out other people.
Yeah, but they know who he is.
They do, but nobody else does. So if he names names, he risks publicly or wherever in case the report leaks.
If Pete says that Tim and Terry know, and they go talk to Tim and Terry, do they have to say Pete told us?
No, but people can figure it out.
Oh.
Is the theory.
Okay.
But I'm saying, listen, there's holes in all the theories. You're right. We're missing a huge piece of information somewhere, right? Shane's theory, which I think is a plausible, non-nefarious explanation, has holes. My theory, which is the ill-intentioned explanation, has holes, right? But it's because we're missing some piece of information somewhere, and we don't know what it is.
So on that Monday show, I said, we realize something happened in 20 hours where this has gone from a 2-week suspension to you better get a coaching firm ready, search firm ready. And I joked, I was like, they better be calling CFB _ Adam McClintock or Dave Bartu or somebody. And he was fired later on that day. And I was like, and it's not like, oh, duh, you were right. There's so much more going on. What I'm saying is there's such a high level of stupidity that
so you hit it right there.
The thing stinks to high heaven.
So you hit it right there. The thing that explains all of it.
Yeah, but you guys were trying to get me because you're not the first. You're trying to get me to believe that the president was so out of touch and just didn't think through another potential outcome.
Yeah.
That he was like, yeah, you know what? Based on what I know and I'm trying to cover up. Based on what I know and I'm trying to cover up.
Yeah.
How about 2 weeks in July with pay? We good?
Can I offer a different explanation?
Yeah.
Maybe he knew and he decided to take that risk.
So he could grab the mic or a phone call or release another statement a day later?
Listen, he probably didn't think it was a day later, but maybe he's going through this process, right? And he's like, okay, here's where I'm at.
Okay. And now and hear my heart, Ravi. I'm not associating levels of jobs or being proficient with competency.
I understand.
I'm not.
Because there's a lot of people in really big jobs who are not competent.
1,000%.
Especially when they're doing things slightly outside of their area of expertise, which covering something up a little bit outside of this guy's area of expertise.
Yeah, but
right.
Yeah. And
so, but hear what I'm saying here. Okay. Let's say it goes the way I say it went, right? And you're right. He sits there and he's like, okay, if people figure this out, I'm going to have to eat it. It's going to look bad. And maybe I even lose my job, right? Which maybe he will, maybe he won't. Doesn't seem like he will, but maybe he will. Maybe he understood the risk. Maybe he saw the next step and decided to do it anyway.
Do you know what I think it is?
What's that?
This is going to blow your mind. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
It defeats everything that you said in the first 5 minutes about knowledge. I think they didn't know how deep-rooted or bad this was.
That's fair.
I don't think they had any idea.
That's totally fair.
I don't.
You're talking about administration.
Yep.
Not Fitz.
Yeah.
That's totally fair.
But
that doesn't answer the question of how the investigation didn't find it.
So do you know what I think about that, though?
What's that?
I want to know what the report said, the investigative report, because I want to know what pushed the school newspaper in the right direction. Let's say Shane is right. Oh, hey, man, we're peers. We're boys, right?
Yeah.
You can find out something. We go to school. Hey, you're in my you're in my econ.
Maybe
you're in my econ 360 class, right?
You live on the same dorm floor.
What's stopping said complaint from saying to the folks, the guys that are doing the report? So do you think he just said, hey, this is going on, and why you guys conduct your 6-month investigation? I'm not saying anything to anybody else until the investigation's done and I hear the report?
Yeah, I don't know.
Does that sound right to anybody?
It does not sound right.
No, it doesn't. But there's huge chunks of it that don't sound right. That's why we're trying to find explanations, right?
Right. But I know I'm not the first person to think of that.
Right.
Because that whole Monday, I just was like, this whole anonymous thing, like, and I said out loud, and I think this is where people maybe confuse the victim blaming thing. I go, how many does it take to get you to move the needle? Was it one person?
For them to actually start an investigation.
Was it 2 people?
Yeah.
Was it 3 people? That's why I asked that question.
Right.
Right?
Because you weren't asking how many people does it matter.
Because I wasn't trying to discredit him.
Right.
Right. Everybody was like, "Oh, is it a starter? What's his plan?" That doesn't matter.
No.
I didn't even care if he had an axe to grind. Was he right?
Right.
He could have hated Fitz's guts.
Sure. Yeah.
But was he accurate in what he said?
Yes.
If he was accurate in what he said, it doesn't affect.
His motive doesn't matter.
Motive doesn't matter one
If he's
bit.
right.
Doesn't matter
right.
one bit.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You know, but I think the most true thing that's been said here is there is a huge piece of
Is that
information.
Tupac's alive?
And living in New Zealand.
Where they're like these Pearl Islands, not too far from.
Is he pouring out a little liquor?
I don't know, man. It took him like 4 years to get comfortable with his new face.
What's his new face look like?
I'm not sure. He wouldn't tell me.
Is he still black?
Yeah, he's still
Okay.
black. That was tough. Hey, have you seen Pablo Escobar's son,
No.
who went through the facial surgeries?
Yeah. I haven't seen him.
Man, he looks like Merrick, the dude that played in The Elephant Man.
Really? Didn't
It's-
go well?
Yeah, and they finally caught him too.
Oh.
Yeah, he was in some bunkers. One of his sons.
John
Well,
Hurt?
You're
Well, that's
an
the
idiot.
guy that played him.
No, I know.
gonna
No,
say-
I'm with you.
Shane's stuck on the Elephant Man over here.
Of all the things,
Well, I think that music means it's time to go.
man,
We probably could have gone another
I have
hour.
a feeling we'll say that a ton.
Yeah, I think we will. But that is your Dish and Ish episode for the week. Dish heavy this week.
Yeah, we're conspiracy theoried up, man.
Well, listen, you gotta when you're missing a piece of information, it's easy to speculate.
yeah, if it gets dirty, people will start telling. There's some heads. that
I
roll.
think it's inevitable with the lawsuits that we'll find out quite a bit more.
with 42 mil potentially on the table.
Absolutely.
Oh,
All right, that is this week's episode of Dish and Ish. That's Damon Benning. I'm Ravi Lulla. Shane Schillerberg, our terrific producer. You can catch us on
less nefarious Shane Schillerberg.
he believes the best in people.
Yeah, he's a good egg.
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you want to find us every single week. We hope you listen in.
A Hurrdat Sports Network production.